Welcome to Conversations of Catholicism again today. As you guys know, I'm Scotty Biggs, and I'm excited because I'm joined with someone that I've known now for, I believe, about 6 years, and that's Jalen Vera. Jalen is a youth ministry alumni, and I've had the great opportunity of going to, I believe NCYC, Steubenville, March for Life, I think now maybe 4 or 5 times, I can't even remember how many times we've gone to the march together. Jalen even led the March for Life one year with us. And I'm excited to be joined with her. I'm excited to dive into our topic today of spiritual warfare and the reality of eternity. I'll go ahead and let you know Jalen chose this topic, and I'm really excited to get into it. But before we do, one of the things I like to do, many of you may not know Jalen, so I want to give her an opportunity to just share a little bit about herself.
So I'm Jalen. I'm a third-year college student at Indiana University in Bloomington. I am double majoring in psychology and fashion design with a minor in business. So it's a little bit of everything. I still don't know what I'm going to do with that after I'm done with undergrad. And I am also super passionate about the pro-life movement. Like Scotty said, I've been going to the March for Life since my freshman year. And last year, I believe it was my 6th year going to the March for Life. It's just a movement that I'm very passionate about. And that's very important to me. So I still try to stay active in whatever ways possible that I can. Like this past summer, I interned at our local Columbus Pregnancy Center for Women. And it was just a beautiful opportunity for me to help and learn how to love and support the women who are facing unplanned pregnancies. I'm still part of the Students for Life at IU group as treasurer, so I help with like planning events and just anything that we can do to spread awareness about our group and about the pro-life movement on campus. Born and raised Catholic my whole life. I come from a Mexican-American family, so having like that Hispanic and Latino background has helped my faith, because as Mexicans and Latinos, we're very devoted to our faith, especially to Our Lady of Guadalupe. And my mom, she has just been a huge role model to me in my faith and has always pushed me to grow and to seek out a relationship with Christ.
I also have to second that. Your mom has been a huge role model in my life as well. Her joy and dedication to the church, as well as your dad, is just inspiring. Getting to know you and your family has been one of the huge blessings in my ministry as well. That's why I like being a youth and young adult minister, is I get to know you guys. All right, well, let's jump in. Let's talk about this topic. So Jalen, why don't we just begin with a little bit, since, I mentioned that you chose this topic. This is something that obviously is important to you. What is it about this topic of spiritual warfare and the reality of eternity that you thought would be a good topic to discuss today?
I think it's a good topic to discuss because, especially for me, it's been something that's like been placed on my heart, I think even since like at the beginning of last year, but I didn't even realize it until like halfway through this year. With everything that's like gone on in 2020, it's just been such a difficult year for everyone in so many different ways. But I just think because of how relevant it is, there's constantly that war for our souls and for our minds being fought every single day. We know that we already, that salvation was already gained and granted to us through Jesus Christ and him dying on the cross for us. But at the same time, like, it's very true and it's very real that the devil's out there and that there's sin and temptation and evil and just all these bad things that like separate us from God and from our purpose in life. And I just think that we're constantly living in that. And as Catholics and Christians in this modern society, obviously we don't fit in. Our worldview and what we believe, our faith, everything that is contrary to what the world tries to tell us. And I think it's something that we need to think about, and need to be praying about for us to, you obviously, to overcome it, and to do what we're meant to do.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you that there is a spiritual battle. I mean, this is something the saints obviously have talked about all through the ages of the church since the beginning. That we are at battle, not against people. We'll go ahead and lay that down. Scripture says our battle isn't against flesh and blood, but against principalities and wickedness. The goal for each person, for each of anyone listening into our conversation today, for you and I both, the goal for everyone is to become as holy as we can, and to get as many people to become as holy as they can with us. And ultimately to spend eternity with God in heaven. That's the mission. That's the great go forth and make disciples of all people. And I think the beginning of that mission is to realize that we are in a spiritual battle, that we do have an enemy, who is not a person, but our enemy is Satan, is the evil one. I like, Jalen, a lot what you said, that the war is won. I mean, Jesus conquered death, hell, and the grave with his death and resurrection. The war has been won. So we can be on the winning side. It's the battles that we go through every single day. It's important to realize that Satan's not going to win. There's no way for evil to overwhelm good, for darkness to overwhelm light, whatever metaphor we want to use. And so to be assured that as we begin this conversation today, the war is won. Heaven is obtainable. We have a spot waiting for us. We just have to continue fighting those battles against temptation, against sin, in our own personal lives each and every day. Yeah. So, Jalen, as we talk about fighting the battle, as we talk about entering into spiritual warfare, what are some of those tools, some weapons, if you will, that you find useful?
Well, I think the big one for me, and the top one that I think should be for everyone, is to pray. I know that everybody hears it all the time, and hears how important it is, but it's truly so important. And I mean, I can share a little bit of my testimony of in regards to prayer and spiritual warfare. Like I mentioned, halfway through last year, I kind of just I was on my phone, and I was looking through a lot of stuff, and I kind of just went into the rabbit hole of a lot of things that are evil and that are happening, real things that are happening out in the world. And it kind of just it broke me, and it shook me to my core to know all the evil and all the bad things that are out there, and just knowing that I couldn't do anything about it. Or at least that I couldn't do enough about it. And that's kind of what opened my eyes to the realization that there is evil out there, and the devil, he's doing his best to sow sin and hate, and just violence in people's hearts and in people's homes and wherever they are. And so it kind of just shook me for a few days, and it's something that I talk about with my family and a few friends, and I kind of was just destroyed for a few days, and I was okay, something needs to change, because I obviously can't stay in this state. And it wasn't until I started praying that I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, and I just started praying I started praying for peace too, and I started praying for all the bad things that are out in the world. I just started to be very intentional about that. And I think from praying, we're able to grow in trust in God too. And I think it's where I started to realize that, because like you said, the war has already been won by God. And I just needed to open my eyes and to trust in him a little bit more and trust in his divine power, and all that he's done and all that he will continue to do for us. And so I think it's so essential for us to pray and to bring like all this stress and all these worries that we have in our lives, whether it be about like big things or little things, is to just bring it to God and just give it to him completely. Another prayer that I use is the Saint Michael prayer. I do that every single day. I kind of do like my own little prayer, just having my conversation with God, but then I always end it with that prayer.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you. There's so much out there to take advantage of. But I think the heart of what you're saying is 100% that prayer is the foundation that we build upon. Prayer is how we enter into relationship with God, is how we speak to God, and it's how we allow God to speak to us even. And Jalen, you're so right. There's so much going on in our world today. There's so much going on in our homes today. There's so much going on in each person's heart today. And there's a lot of things that we don't have control over. And that's a hard thing to admit for a lot of people. And it's a hard thing. I often tell people, again, the victory's been won. All we have to do is continue the daily battles that we have and fight for God, because the victory's been won. And I've often, teenagers especially, have come to me asking questions about hell, and they don't want to go to hell. How do I stay out of hell? Things like that, which I think, so many times we wonder about. Sometimes I wish people would ask me, Scotty, how can I make sure heaven's my home instead of worrying about the fear side, right? Ask more of the hopeful question instead of the fearful question. It's kind of a heart transition there, but that's okay. We'll work on that. But I often tell people it's not hard to avoid going to hell and obtaining heaven, because God gave us a roadmap to use. God gave us a battle plan to use, and those are the sacraments. And I often tell people, if you live a life that is centered around the sacraments, you're going to be fine. So yeah, you might sin, you might make mistakes, you might fall short of the glory of God. We all have, we all do. But that's why God gave us the sacrament of reconciliation. So when you find yourself in sin, and you go to the sacrament of reconciliation, that healing is brought to you. Those of us like myself who are married, that is a sacrament. And when we're faithful to our marriage, following your vocation wherever you are in life. For me, I'm a married person. I have a great job. I love my job. My job of working with youth and young adults in the church is a phenomenal thing, and it brings me a lot of joy. But it is not my vocation. It is not the sacrament that I follow. My wife comes first before my job. And often I think as ministers, sometimes we fall into the trap of, well, I'm working for God. That's my prayer. I'm doing all of this stuff. I'm staying busy. But that's not what God calls us to do often. God calls us to follow the sacraments. And so for me, putting my wife first before my work, putting my future family first is important. But yeah, keeping a life that is centered around the sacraments. Those of us who have been baptized, we've been given the gift of salvation. In our baptism, we died with Christ and we rose again. And so as long as we're faithful to the sacraments, that's our ticket. And of course, the sacraments and prayer go together, right? They're hand in hand.
Yeah, and kind of going off of that, I think like before we can even desire to like make a change out in the world, I think obviously you have to start with yourself. Like you can't try to like help other people if you're not like even healed yourself, if you're not receiving God into your life. I once was told that like it's not possible for us to pour into other people if we ourselves are not being poured into by God. And I think that's very true. I think first want to see a change, we gotta make the change within ourselves, and even like within our homes. I think it has to start there. I think that's when real change will happen, is when we start with ourselves, because it's so easy to try to start correcting other people's lives
Mm-hmm.
and to start correcting the world. And I
Yeah.
think that's the path that many people try to take,
Yeah.
and they fail, and it's hard.
Yeah. It's sometimes I think it's easier, and I think this because I'm a youth and young adult minister. It's it's easier to solve everyone else's problems when they come to us, right? And I know there's probably parents listening that they have kids and they're like, okay, I can solve my kids' problems easy, but I can't fix my own. And sometimes, especially family members, it's so easy to see the flaws and the problems in our own homes, right?
Yeah.
And try to solve other people's problems instead of work on ourselves. So I agree with you there. When I was in New York working with the Capuchins, one of the things they taught me that really stuck with me is the idea that you can't give what you do not have. I mean, and that's true in every aspect of life, right? If you want to bless somebody with money
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
you don't have money to give, you can't bless them. Or if you want to give someone peace and internally you are feeling chaotic and troubled, you can't really give that peace to others.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I think cultivating it within ourselves. It reminds me that my spiritual battle against the enemy is my spiritual battle. It's not your spiritual battle, right? It's a whole different battle that you're
Mm-hmm.
fighting that I'm having to fight. But I do think we can help one another in doing
Yeah.
in fighting. But I don't think that help comes from often the idea that we tell people, well, you're not doing things right. Here's how you really should live your life. Um, I at least in my ministry, what I found is listening to the other person is usually the first step, right? Non-judgmental, just listening to them, seeing where they're coming from. And I think there's so many times in our families, in our homes, with our friends. Um, that's where we can begin to help other people fight their battles, especially if they're not a person of
Yeah.
prayer or if they've been away from the church or something like that.
I think it's so important also to have like humility,
Mm,
um, because it's so, like, the human person can be very like self-centered, and just thinking about themselves, and so a lot of the times we're just trying to like tell other people like what we want to tell them. But like you said, I think we have to stop talking and try to listen more, and try to put that person before yourself, and put whatever they have to say before trying to preach to them, or to impose your viewpoints and opinions. So I think it takes a huge sense of humility to try to do that, to try to put the other person's needs. And that's part of love, I think, too, is to put that other person before yourself.
love is the key. Scripture reveals that time and again. I mean, God is love. For me, the love I have for the people I minister to, or the people I minister with, or um, anyone else, it comes from that idea that I want them to be the best version of themselves. I want them to be as holy as they can get and be the saint that they're called to be and spend eternity with God and not to go to hell, right? I mean, that's part of the love that I have for people. And I think one of the dangers for a lot of people, and it's been a danger in my life time and again. I'm a very independent person. Um, I've often enjoyed that about myself. I would much rather, Jalen, help you than to ask you to help me. Um, and I'm,
Yes, I feel that.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just the same way.
I'm independent. I like to do things my way, and sometimes that has led me in my life to trying to do this alone, trying to do the spiritual journey alone, trying to fight Satan, the temptations, whatever comes in my life by myself. Um, and there's times I think all of us fall into that idea, but I think it's so important, no matter what age group you fall into, whether you're a teenager, a young adult, whether you're older, whatever it may be, you've got to have a solid group of faithful people around you who are dedicated to you and dedicated to God. that can help you fight this fight. Again, it's your battle. It's not their battle. They can't fight it for you. But I think there's so many times that we can fight with people. Jayla, what communities? You're a college person. College is certainly a battleground, right? There's a lot of temptation. There's whether it's going out and partying, whether it's jumping into the hookup culture, or whether it's abandoning the church or not going to mass on Sunday because your parents aren't there. How have you, as a college person, surrounded yourself with that community of people who both love you and love God?
Well, I think the place that I feel most welcome to, and the place that I can say I've truly found a community where I can grow in faith, is obviously like the people that I go to church with, are my Hoosier Catholics, are the people who I can say are my community. And also a lot of my close friends at IU are also participating Hoosier Catholics. So I think it helps to have them to be able to say that I'm super close to those people and share that very important aspect of my life, which is my faith. And yeah, Hoosier Catholic, I mean, it's been such a blessing. The first year, it was super tricky because being a brand new student at IU at this public school with so much to see and so many things to be a part of, I did struggle a little bit to find community right away, to find friends. I mean, I already had a few friends from back home who also went to IU, but it was just hard. It was hard for me to find that true community. And it wasn't until I went on this retreat that they do every semester at St. Paul's. It's called Hoosier Awakening. And it was then that I was surrounded by these students. Obviously, a lot of the retreatants there were my age, were freshmen, a few upperclassmen, and a lot of the staff, which is mainly comprised of students, were upperclassmen. But it was then that I saw these students who, like you said, we have a lot of freedom in college, but they were there and they were putting on this retreat for us, and just seeing how they were living their faith every single day, and just seeing them, I don't know, it made me aspire to be like them and to aspire to have a faith like them, because their faith, because like I said, I was born and raised Catholic, and most of my life growing up, I tried to stay involved with the church. I tried to do everything that I possibly could. But I think I got to a moment in my life where it kind of was just stagnant. And I know that I could have been doing more, but I wasn't doing more. I kind of just let myself fall into a level of comfort and a level of complacency with my faith and how I was living it. And so it wasn't until I was there at college and I saw these Hoosier Catholics and how they were living out their faith, and it kind of just blew my mind away. I was like, wow, I want to be like them. I want to live my faith out like them. And that kind of just inspired me to do more and be more. And ever since that retreat, I kind of just grew and I grew. And even after that retreat, I was still very much independent because it's hard for me to seek out help from others and seek out that community first. But then sophomore year of college, that's when I just kind of immersed myself, and I told myself that I had to push myself out of my comfort zone, out of my comfort level. And when I said to God, I was like, I'm going to start saying a lot more yes to whatever that you are putting in front of me. And it wasn't until then, when I started saying yes, that I was truly able to immerse myself in this community at St. Paul's and in Hoosier Catholic. So I don't think I've mentioned it before, but Focus
Hmm.
is a group on a lot of college campuses around the U.S. and even in a few countries outside of the U.S. Stands for Fellowship of Catholic University Students. So we have a few missionaries there at IU and at St. Paul's. I think there's 5 of them. They try to keep 5 at our campus, and they like help with these retreats, and they do a lot of things. But I've also grown in an authentic friendship and in my faith because the Focus, I would have to say, because I'm currently growing in and living in discipleship. So I'm being formed in my faith by someone else, by someone who I have an authentic friendship and relationship with. And I myself am informing myself to be that discipler to someone else as well, and to share the gospel message and to share the truth of God and everything that he is and he's done for us to others as well out in the world. I feel pretty good about my faith, and I feel like I'm at a point where I'm just growing in it. I'm just growing in this relationship that I have with God and in my faith, and it's just gonna keep on going up.
Yeah, and you know that's the great thing, and I think that's kind of the pivotal point that people should really take notice of. The community we surround ourselves, it will make or break us. That's and I think, again, I'm only 31, so I don't really know, beyond my age range, but I think that's true of all generations. That the community we surround ourselves will make or break us. And if we're intentional within ourselves to say, okay, I'm going to help my community grow closer to God, but I'm also surrounding myself with a community that's going to help me grow closer to God. It's a beautiful thing that just builds upon each other, and it's not a secret. That's been the kind of ingredient of Catholicism for the past 2,000 years, right? Jesus gathered around himself a group of 12 that wanted to seek all that was true, beautiful, and good. And he helped them do that, and then they surrounded themselves with a group, and continuously on and on and on, right? Yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing, to realize that in this battle that we face, we're not alone. We have weapons at our disposal, and the thing that I really want to mention is God desires us more than we could ever desire God. God desires us to be victorious in our battles over sin, over temptation. God desires us to surround ourselves with that community. And Jalen, what I hear in your story, and I've always heard this in your story since I've known you, your freshman year, is that in your life, in everyone's life, God places those key moments, those key people in our lives to help us. He gives us the grace that we need through the sacraments to help us along this journey. I know there's so many people right now listening, and I know that 2020 has been a crazy year. Now that even as we enter into 2021, it seems like it's going to be a crazy year. Hopefully I'm wrong, but there's so much anxiety. There's so much fear. There's so much going on in our world. But I think it's important for people to hear that God desires your good, that God desires to love you, and he is constantly pouring out grace upon grace upon grace, blessing upon blessing upon blessing, that even though everything else is going crazy, when we take those moments, we look back and we say, okay, here are the blessings that God has sent me. Here are the graces that I have. Here's how I'm praying. Here's how I'm not fighting alone. Here's how I'm staying faithful to the sacrament. God is always faithful to us, and God is always willing to kind of help us along this journey. And not only that, but here's the part that I love the most, is that God has given us an army of angels to fight with us, and that we don't fight this just through our own prayers. But we have the witness of the saints, we have the army of the angels, and grace upon grace upon grace, and blessing upon blessing upon blessing. We can win this. We can win these battles over temptation, over sin, and I hope people realize that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so beautiful because, like you said, we do have this army of saints that like we can look up to as well, and our army of angels as well. And I think truly it can be as simple. We make it harder for ourselves, but it doesn't have to be hard. It's so simple because God, he loves us so much, and He's so merciful.
Jalen, are there any like super practical tips? If someone came up to you and said, "Okay, I listened to the recording of you and Scotty, but obviously I didn't listen to all of it because he asked about practical tips and I didn't hear that, but whatever."
Yeah.
If someone said, "What's something practical I can do in my day-to-day life?" What would you tell them?
Kind of going back to like what you said about community, it's so important for us to surround ourselves by people, mostly by people who share the same faith and who share the same beliefs and who are striving for sainthood and are striving to get to heaven. I think it's so important for us to have those people in our lives. So just like whether that be your parents, your family, if they're or your friends, is to just surround yourself by those people or seek out those friendships.
Yeah.
Maybe if you don't even have them now, is to just seek out someone who can be that for you. And also, our phone and the internet can be great at times, but it can also be pretty bad. Like I mentioned, the way that I realized or that I opened my eyes to the spiritual warfare was because I was on my phone and was looking at some pretty heavy stuff. So if that's what's bringing you like a lot of stress and that's disturbing your internal peace, and that's being that's hurting your mental health, is to just take some time away from whatever it is that's on your phone. Take some time away from social media. I know how addicting it can be. I'm guilty of social media. I've always been on it, but it's just so essential for us to take some time away from that. Receiving the sacraments, I know that I was most at peace whenever I was going to daily mass pretty often. What's the best way to go about your day than to have to receive Jesus and to have Him in you? I think that's pretty essential too. If you can just try it's just daily mass is only half an hour of your day. I'm sure we can squeeze it in. And now that we're living in pandemic times, you can watch it on your laptop or on your phone. It's as easy as not having to like leave your house or anything. You can have daily mass there.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you that there are a lot of temptations. And if something is causing us to gravitate toward a negative view or gravitate towards something that isn't good, beautiful, and true, put that aside. Yeah, and I think you're right. You don't, we're not asking you to take your phone and throw it in the river, right? But just take a break from all of this stuff. There's a book that I read that I would recommend to anybody, and it's by C.S. Lewis. Most people who know me know that I love everything that C.S. Lewis wrote. He wrote the Narnia series. Great author. But in one of his, I believe it was one of his final books, it was called The Screw Tape Letters. And it's a book that is just about spiritual warfare. And C.S. Lewis, great Christian man, wrote it from the perspective of a lesser demon asking advice of a senior demon on how to corrupt a soul to go to hell. And C.S. Lewis in interviews later mentioned that he hated having to write the book, but he felt called to write the book. But taking on that persona and looking at a human person through the lens, if you will, of the demonic was a very hard thing for him to do. But I think it's a great book because it does talk a lot about these kind of things, and it talks a lot about the easiest way to win a soul over for evil isn't through big actions. It's not through huge points of corruption, but it's through the little things. Getting too overwhelmed by politics, by the news, getting too overwhelmed into all of this other stuff, being too into anything that isn't good, true, and beautiful. And it's these slow little corruptions that slowly chip away at who we are and who we were created to be. And so for anyone looking for a book right now, I know so many people are working from home these days and need something to do. I would highly recommend, go on Amazon, go, if you have the app Hoopla connected with your library, I'm sure it's there too. But the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis is a phenomenal one to help you get an insight into kind of spiritual warfare.
Yeah, I kind of just want to go back to what we were both talking and just really reemphasize that the war has already been won. Jesus already won that war for us. We don't have to worry about doing that. All that he asks of us is to just try to have a relationship with him and to love him and to love our neighbor. The devil is still going to be around. There's still going to be sin and evil, but as long as we're constantly trying to have that relationship with God, only then will we be able to have and receive the graces that we need to deal with those temptations and deal with all that is going out and that is happening around us. But all that he asks is for us to try, to just try. Yeah.
And, to reiterate, to kind of condense this all in a nutshell moment for folks, it's important not to overcomplicate this because it's simple, right? Mm-hmm. Jesus knows us. God knows the hearts of all of humanity. And he knows that for all of us, and some of us more specifically, we need things to be simple. And what we've discussed today is pretty darn simple. In order to win the battle of spiritual warfare in your life, in order to, make heaven your home, it's pretty simple. Pray. Don't fight alone. Surround yourself with a community, and be faithful to the sacraments. In a nutshell, that's what we presented to everyone today, and I think that's a great thing. I would even add on that one extra thing just because it's important to me, and I would say that have a devotion to Our Lady, pray the Rosary, wear a scapular, surround yourself with the sacramentals that Our Lady has given us to help us fight this battle. Because ultimately, Satan is more afraid of Mary than anyone else, because she will crush his head, and has crushed his head even. And so surround yourself with a Marian devotion. Again, I'm a very Marian person, right? Mary is one of the cornerstones of my faith. So of course I say that. But even if you don't want to complicate things that much, prayer, don't fight alone, surround yourself with the sacraments. And you're going to make this. Great. I think that's our time for today. I certainly want to thank everyone for listening. But Jalen, I really want to thank you. Is there anything that people listening today, is there anything that you need prayers about that people can pray for you?
I know that I said that I feel more at peace than I've ever felt, but to just continue to feel that peace, because we're continuing to struggle in our country right now. So just peace, to have peace and trust in God, and in his divine power and what he has planned for each and every one of our lives, but his plan for our country too, and for our world.
Yeah, and I would add on to that, those of you praying for Jalen, she also mentioned she is a double major towards the end of her college career.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sure some extra prayers in regard to all that she is having to study for and all the homework and everything that's going on. Yeah, so please pray for her studies as well. Being a double major cannot be easy, especially toward this far into her college career. So keep Jalen in your prayers there.
Oh, it's not. Yeah, the online classes don't help either.
Yeah.
But we're getting through it.
Good. All right. For those of you listening, we'll look forward again to next Tuesday when we will do this again. Thank you for joining us for Conversations of Catholicism.